Hello. I'm recording a live video update from Ukraine again today. I have not been able to record it for several days, so I just want to let you know that here in Lviv we are all right, relatively safe and well. Unfortunately, we cannot say it about people in other parts of Ukraine. Everyone in Ukraine today is thinking about Mariupol, this city, the name of which you all have learned through these several weeks. It's been over 40 days as it is in full siege, completely blocked, encircled by Russian troops. Something like 50% of the city are controlled, roughly 50% of the city are controlled by Russian side and about 50% by Ukrainian. The situation in this city is catastrophic. There are still over 100,000 of civilians blocked in the city, although from time to time there are corridors by which they can leave. This is all extremely problematic, and it's officially said that there are thousands and thousands of people killed in the city, and their bodies are not even recovered under the rubble of buildings and on the streets. Our fighters in Mariupol, they hold fast, but their strength is not boundless, and they have no enough food, no enough water. They have very little ammunition left, and it's unclear for how many more days then they can still hold the city. There were various reports through the social media, through private contacts of people with fighters in Mariupol that they are basically fighting their final last battle these days. We still hope in the Lord and hope that our government, our officials, our military leadership can organize some kind of rescue operation. It's even difficult to see how this operation could be done because the city is blocked from all the sides and encircled by like 100 kilometers with Russian troops from all the sides. So it's impossible without heavy support from the warplanes, artillery, tanks to lift that blockade or somehow to crash it to enter the city. But sometimes miracles happen, and we all pray that this brave people, brave defenders of Mariupol will be rescued from this terrible situation. Otherwise, hundreds of our soldiers will die there or will be taken as prisoners of war. So Mariupol is a wound number one on the body of Ukraine today, and I ask you all to pray for the city and its brave defenders. You all know probably like the main news, factual news, what happened in Ukraine. There was this strike with a missile of a train station in the city of Kramatorsk, and there were many more atrocities and terrible acts of violence committed over the past days. One thing that I wanted to draw your attention to is that what's going on is not simply a war, is not just casualties of the fighting, but Putin and his regime are committing real genocide in Ukraine. In the territories which they managed to occupy by now, and in the territories which were occupied but then purged from Russian soldiers, we see a clear pattern that the troops enter, they push the front, and then in the villages or towns that are behind their backs, Russian security services come, and various special forces. And what they do, they just go from house to house. They arrest people based on some preliminary lists. Usually they pay special attention to men who were in Ukrainian army, so supposedly were fighting in Donbass over this 6-7 years of war, and so pro-Ukrainian activists, political, religious, cultural, social, anyone who basically had explicit patriotic position and did something for their country, they are in the risk group. They are often arrested and then executed. Those of you who follow the news in Ukraine closely might have heard that in the first days of the war, when we started to stop those columns of tanks that were entering Ukraine, so those convoys were bombed by Ukrainian artillery, and then Ukrainian soldiers would look at the tanks and the armed vehicles, what they were carrying. And one of the things we were very much surprised with is that they were carrying a lot of plastic bags for dead bodies. And then later there was a leak of some Russian documentation that altogether for the military operation in Ukraine, they purchased 45,000 of plastic bags for bodies. And first we thought that this was for the Russian military casualties, although the number is super high. They were planning to finish the operation within several days, so it's very improbable that they would estimate their casualties at 45,000 soldiers. Also, they were dragging with them mobile crematoria, so special cars in which they could burn dead bodies. And now when we liberated some villages and towns, and we find those mass graves, and we see the methodology they are using to kill Ukrainian civilians, Ukrainian activists, we understand that those plastic bags and those crematoria were not for the Russian soldiers, they were for Ukrainian people who had to be systematically killed, who were planned to be systematically killed by the Russian army. And then there was again a leak of documents with a clear plan to purge Ukraine from all nationalistic elements. So whoever is a patriot of their own country falls under the designation of nationalistic element, and those had to be killed in tens of thousands. So the good news is that we stopped them in the north of Ukraine, and it's what happened there, these terrible acts of genocide, were only just first steps of what they were planning to do at much larger scale. The bad news is that we don't know what's happening now in the occupied areas of southeast Ukraine, of eastern Ukraine, because those areas are rather considerable, and there are many, many villages and towns under, and even the city, a large regional center city of Kherson, under the occupation, and we can gather only some rumors and some bits of information from those settlements, and we know that they are killing people there too, killing systematically and ruthlessly. After the liberation, God willing, we will see how many were the victims and what exactly was happening there during these days. So the situation, although it's kind of optimistic from the military point of view, partially, still the situation is extremely gruesome. And we are preparing for a big battle at Donbass. We do not know when it will take place, because Russia is planning from day to day. It was already announced like 5 days ago that they are dragging more and more troops into this battlefield in the central, southern eastern Ukraine, Mariupol, and then north all the way to Kharkiv. So far, no major offensive by Russians was launched, and it's a sign that their military force is not sufficient yet. They are still amassing troops, and we can expect this major attempt to advance further in the territory of Ukraine at any moment. The city of Mariupol, the defenders of the city of Mariupol are doing their invaluable service to Ukraine, because they hold like 20,000 around 20,000 of Russian troops around the city. If it were not for the defenders of Mariupol, all those troops would have free hands to go to fight somewhere else, and it would be obviously very difficult for Ukrainian soldiers in other parts of Ukraine. We had some positive diplomatic signals over the weekend. There was Boris Johnson here. There were a couple of other world leaders visiting Ukraine and promising their help, military help. Even the head of European diplomacy, Borrell, was in Kiev, and he was using quite militant rhetoric, which is very untypical for European bureaucrats. But he was saying that what the situation calls for is a military solution of the conflict. It's becoming clear even to the most hedonistic, should I say, leaders of European institutions and all those very peaceful, pacifistic European bureaucrats, that there is no other way to stop the offender as by the brutal military force, unfortunately. The language of sanctions, as much as they are needed, is not enough at this point. And the language of diplomacy and of humanitarian arguments is useless. It's not helping. We have to stop the aggression on the ground. And for that, I ask your prayers, your support. Remember Ukraine in your daily prayers, in your conversations with your friends. If you can donate to our initiative, Help to the Frontlines, we will be very grateful, because we are purchasing the equipment for the army and medical supplies all the time. Thanks to you, we collected a good sum of money that went to the soldiers and to some refugees. I thank you for that, but we continue to struggle and to fight, and please continue supporting us. Thank you very much for your attention, and please watch this video, spread it, comment. It helps to get some visibility in the YouTube, and by our common efforts, I hope we can all end this war in victory as soon as possible. Thank you very much.